Hey everyone, it's Brandon from TopTenGamer.com again, and today we're going to look at an Intel and AMD gaming PC from $350 to $450. We're going to talk about different parts that you'd get for the Intel and the AMD build and kind of what the advantages of each of these are. Now recently I did a $400 to $600 green mini ITX gaming PC, currently using that with Plex kind of as my Plex media server. Absolutely love it. But I wanted to get a little bit away from that this time to just talk about what kind of computer, what kind of gaming PC with what kind of graphics card we can get at this low budget price range. The same price range that we find mini consoles and things like that. Jumping right into the build, we're going to take a look at this table and take a look at processors. In the $350 price range, a little while ago, I would have just recommended the Pentium G3258. Certainly the best single-threaded performer on the market at that $70 to $80 price range. But you should also take a look at the Athlon 860K. This is an FM2 Plus platform processor. You're going to need an FM2 Plus motherboard in order to use it. Now, the Athlon 860K is a good single-threaded performance CPU, but what it has going for it is quad-core performance. Now, the G3258 isn't going to give you that, and since some games require 4 cores, it may be worthwhile for some of you to go in that direction. On the $400 to $450 side of things, your choice here is really between a Haswell i3 or something like the FX 6300. I can no longer recommend the FX 6300. The i3 4160 is the better choice here and is what you should go for if you're willing to spend this much money. Down the road, hopefully that changes. I'm hoping that AMD has a processor that I can recommend at the $110 to $120 range, but right now it's the i3 4160. Moving on to the graphics card, at the $350 level, I'm going to recommend the GTX 750 Ti. We do have a 950 release coming shortly, but it looks like the 950 is going to be more in the $150 range. So it doesn't really make sense to recommend that at this point in time, at least for a $350 build. Hopefully in the future that will come down in price to this same level, and I think you'll get a really great card for the money. In our $400 and $450 build, I'm going to recommend you go with either the R9 270X or the R7 370. Both great graphics cards, both from AMD, and both will provide you what's going to be the best value for your money. Now, I want to bring up a little chart here. NeoSeeker offered some benchmarks that compared the R7 370 and also the 750 Ti in there. Clearly, they're different. There's a difference in price there, but it's good to see at least what you get by upgrading from the 750 Ti. First of all, Battlefield 4 Ultra preset, you're going to get about 39 frames. With the R7 370, 750 Ti, 30 frames. So not bad either way. I mean, you can get 30 frames a second with the Ultra preset. If you tweak it down to medium or high, you're going to get some pretty good frames with a relatively cheap card. Considering how hard Battlefield 4 was for a lot of people to run in the past, now you can do it with a $100 card. Not bad. Assassin's Creed High with 4 times MSAA, R7 370, 29 frames, 750 Ti, 22. Total War Rome 2, R7 370, 29, 750 Ti, 22. So what's that? Like anywhere from a 22, 35, or 40% frame increase if you go with the R7 370. It's a good step up either way. Obviously, you don't have to do that, but that gives you a good idea of what you're going to get in terms of the 300 going from the $350 build all the way to the $400 to $450 build. Now, your main bottleneck here is probably not going to be your CPU in terms of gaming because you don't have enough graphics card here to make your CPU the bottleneck. So keep that in mind. I think the i3 4160 is more than good enough for something like the R7 370. On the motherboard side of things, we're keeping the same motherboard for either build here because we're trying to maximize performance. They're both good and cheap motherboards, under $50. For your Pentium G3258, I like the MSI H81M-P33. Now, keep in mind, this is a very rare thing, but if the BIOS isn't updated on that MSI H81M-P33, you might have to figure out a way to get it updated. But most likely, more than likely, and for many of the people I've come across at this point in time, there's really nothing to be worried about. I just want to throw that caveat in there in case someone along the line gets a really old version of this motherboard. Now, on the FM2 Plus side, the Gigabyte GA-F2868HM-H, those model numbers, is another cheap and good motherboard that you're just getting all you need in your motherboard here and none of what you don't need. And you're just getting a small form factor going, and regardless of not being able to do too much overclocking here, although with the P33 from MSI, I have heard people getting a lot of overclocking, but with this budget, we're not going to be doing much overclocking. These motherboards are more than fine. On the RAM side of things, get 8 gigabytes from a reputable manufacturer at 1600 megahertz. G-Skill, the G-Skill NS RAM, I think I found it for like 40 bucks this week. Sometimes Corsair Vengeance comes along and is that cheap. Sometimes there's some Kingston options. Just find 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's all you're going to need with this particular build, and you'll be good for years to come. So just go ahead and get the RAM you need right now. On the storage front, I'm going to recommend a Western Digital Caviar Blue drive. For this build, we've got $50. So we're going with the 1 terabyte version, 7400 RPM hard drive. You could also think about adding like one of those $50 120 gigabyte solid state drives to speed up your system a lot. I know that that's what I would do, but you know, when you have a budget like this, you might rather put that money towards your graphics card or whatever, but that's something to think about as well. On the power supply front, you can go with something like the EarthWatt from Antec, or the VP450 that I recommended in the last build, or also the EVGA 430 watt here I've been able to find for $24.99. It isn't the end all to power supplies, but it should be good enough for this inexpensive build. Okay, now for case, I'm going to recommend the same case that we had for our $250 build, and that's because it has USB 2.0 headers in the front and it's cheap, and these motherboards, I believe both these motherboards, neither one of them have USB 3 headers. So you'll get a case that's incompatible, and you'll have to get a cord to use with from USB 2 to 3, and it just won't be worth your time. So something like the Thermaltake V3VL80001 W2Z would be ideal here in terms of compatibility. All right, so in terms of performance, taking a look at where we are with the $250 build, moving up to the $350 build, what we really get here is flexibility. A game like Battlefield 4, you'd have no problem hitting that at least 30 frames in Ultra, right? So you could probably get 60 on something like medium settings. I don't have those exact numbers, but in other words, you're much better off with the $350 build as opposed to the $250 build. Although, you know, $100 more, that's about what, like 30 to 40% of that other budget. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Anyway, I'm happy with this build overall. It's pretty similar to other builds that I've done in the past, but hopefully the benchmarks, taking benchmarks from another source, is good enough for you guys to get a good idea of the differences between like the 370 and the 750 Ti. Excited to see numbers for the 950 coming up. What do you guys think about that? Let me know. Also, there's an article in the description below. Go check it out with a list of these parts. You can also go check out the parts list in the description, where I'll have links to Amazon that allow us to get some support for the channel, get the channel the money it needs to do more builds just like this one and other builds and more hands-on builds that you guys are asking for. Be sure to ask me any questions that you have in the description below. I'm happy to help. I'm also available at facebook.com/TopTenGamer or forum.toptengamer.com. Again, good to see you guys, and we'll see you next time.